Welcome to the Connected Campus Podcast, where we explore the ways that diverse professionals are working every day to optimize their efforts to recruit, retain, and graduate their students.
We are back with another in our continuing series of conversations with top leaders in higher ed IT across the country. So, we're trying to kind of, find the kind of common thread through all those conversations, but also highlight just the diversity of people and backgrounds and things. So kind of trying to balance those two. So we'll kind of see where our conversation today takes us. But we'll start as we always do, have our guest introduce themselves. So Alan, take it away.
Hey, Dustin, thank you. I'm Alan Schomaker. I am the Chief Information Officer at Loyola University of New Orleans. I've been in this role for about almost 2.5 years now and was brought in to help lead the digital transformation for our campus.
Yeah, I mean, those are the key words, digital transformation, and we'll dig in with that in a little bit. But I know looking at your background, and it's something that I've kind of drawn a lot of comparisons in my head, is kind of the similarities just generally kind of structurally of like health systems and higher education, like big, large enterprises likely have been around for a long time, and you've worked across, those different areas and everything. Just when you look back, are there any sort of similarities or just like, are they completely different? I don't know if like I'm sort of, making too many assumptions, I guess, of like them being kind of similar in the way that they sort of culturally maybe kind of, leverage technology or make decisions and those sort of things. Like, how have you seen maybe similarities between like working in IT and health systems and in higher ed?
It's kind of transformed over the past few years. I was part of healthcare systems for about 20 years. And one of my positions was also, it was at a health sciences center. So it was a combination of higher education and healthcare together. But the similarities are they're both kind of these large organizations, slow to move, make changes, because they've been doing things in the same way for many, many years. But in the past few years, there's kind of been a radical shift, partly because of the COVID pandemic, partly just because of economics and things that are changing in the market. One of the things that we're seeing right now that's similar on both industries is using technology to enhance the customer experience. One of the ways they're doing that is in healthcare through telemedicine, which really came out through COVID pandemic. Also with higher education, because of the COVID and remote learning, they're now seeing that that's an avenue for revenue for colleges right now, especially with the cost of tuition just keeps skyrocketing each year. When you on top of housing costs, everything else that's part of the whole college experience. I think you're seeing a lot more colleges, including Loyola. We're looking at other ways to create revenue for the non-traditional students, and a lot of that is through online education, for night classes, and using technology in those manners to try to reach a broader audience and focus on the non-traditional students. One of the things that I'm also seeing in healthcare and higher education is you've got everybody's competing for the same dollars for the customers, whether it's healthcare or college students. What we're seeing in higher education is starting around 2025, we're going to see a population cliff that's coming up. So competition is going to become even more critical to get those students in. Competition is going up, and I think the institutions that use technology to enhance the user experience, for whether it's for a college student or in healthcare, we're seeing the same thing. They're trying to enhance the patient experience through whether it's through the telehealth, whether it's through enhanced room in the hospitals for audio visual, just whatever it is to create a more personalized and enhanced experience. And that's kind of what we're seeing right now across both industries.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's interesting that one, it's like culturally a lot of similarities, but that they're both kind of grappling with the best sort of tools and platforms and processes to like expand access while also sort of improving quality. And you kind of have to maybe like throttle a little bit where it's just like if we're getting like mobile health units or something like out into, different areas. It's like, it's obviously they can't do like what a hospital can do, but you are at least increasing access and sort of entry points. And the same thing of like, okay, with digital education, you're getting, more often than not anymore, like the same quality education, but you are losing out on sort of the, unique sort of campus environment and some of the different services and how they might be delivered. And those are sort of the continuous improvement cycles of like, okay, how can we try to, get as many support resources to students as possible, whether they are full-time on campus, hybrid, or on fully online, or those sort of things. But it's just, just like an interesting paradigm shift, which, like you said, and like with so many other things, that was accelerated by the pandemic of just like, the access for higher education. Because I know it's something where like, and again, it's another similarity, I guess, between health systems and higher ed is like just seeing them like advertise more because they're trying to, like you said, like compete for the students or compete for patients. It's just like kind of one of those things where it's like, I guess, like you want to encourage people to like be healthy and go to your particular hospital, or like, it's just something where it's like, 30 plus years ago, it's like they kind of just were there. Like you didn't need to like advertise necessarily, but like now it is sort of, the competitiveness and just kind of a general, I think, societal value of sort of like, taking care of yourself or, improving yourself through education and everything like that. But yeah, I mean, both of those very large kind of societal institutions going through these digital transformation changes. And like you said, you come to Loyola and you've been sort of helping to guide those efforts there. And we'll probably sit with this question for a little bit. So however you want to kind of start it out, but just like any sort of relevant anecdotes or advice that you can share from this experience, that you've sort of engrossed yourself in the higher ed context and how they're sort of interfacing with digital transformation, which can obviously mean a lot of things.
Yeah, it means a lot of different things. For Loyola, one of the things that they wanted to do was we've been using a 45-year-old mainframe on campus for our business applications, our finance, HR, student systems, since sometime in the late 70s. So part of their digital transformation was we're going to get off the mainframe and move to a more of a cloud-based application to enhance the user experience. Again, we're trying to reach out. It's hard to get a mainframe screen up here on a student's phone. It just doesn't work well. So that was a big driving factor of the digital transformation. For Loyola's case, we're in New Orleans, which is and it's June. This week starts June 1. So anybody living in the Gulf Coast knows that hurricane season, starts Thursday and goes till November 30th. That was kind of a big push. Also, in 2020, New Orleans was, if you've seen the Hurricane Center and their cone of uncertainty that tracks the path of hurricanes, in 2020, New Orleans was in a cone of uncertainty 8 times during the summer of 2020. So the whole push to get off this mainframe on campus was the driving factor. Was we're susceptible to natural disasters in this area, and we don't want to prolong that any longer than we absolutely have to. And in fact, when we started the process, we started the process in June of 21. Yeah, in June of 21. We were about 2.5 months into our migration of our data and moving our systems, and then Hurricane Ida hit New Orleans in August. So one of the things that happened, and it kind of reemphasized how vulnerable we are, is one of the main electrical transmission towers that feed the New Orleans area was damaged in the hurricane and actually collapsed into the river. But when that happened, the entire metro area lost power. It was like 10:30 on Sunday night, and so we were down. The whole city was down for a few days without power. We were able, on campus we have backup generators, and so after that happened Monday, we started our process of bringing our systems back online, and then everything was fine until about Monday night when the backup generator for our data center failed. So we were, even though we brought our systems back online, we did it. We followed our plan. We did everything we were supposed to do as part of our disaster recovery procedures, and then our backup generator fails. So we ended up having to overnight a generator from Houston to here to get our data center systems back online again. Um, and you go through this whole process of, you've got your plan. And I guess in the military that there's a quote that they have that's, no plan survives contact with the enemy. And because you just can't account for everything that could possibly go wrong. We've got 9 backup generators here on campus. The one that failed was the one that fed at the data center. We brought our backup generator. We had brought in another generator. That one ran for about a week, and then that one failed too. So we had to get another generator for us. So what we went through this process, and you can just never take enough steps. I guess the insights from that is you still have to follow your plan though. I think overall it set our whole project back about 2.5 weeks. And then, even though we had people, from our campus that had damaged their homes and, flooding and water in their houses, we were able to continue working, through this process because of some of the plans we'd put in place prior to that. It was a difficult time. It wasn't nearly as bad as Hurricane Katrina. Went through that as well, but that was one of the, it just kind of reemphasized to everybody that this was part of the process, and there was a reason that we needed to get this job done.
Yeah, just making it. Yeah, just making it so visceral, like the idea of like, well, this, like if you're kind of saying theoretically like, okay, yeah, like why we want to get away from the mainframe is for stuff like this, and then it like literally happens in the middle of that process. Like, that's I don't know if irony is the right word, but yeah, and I think it's that idea of like you said, like you can't sort of prevent everything from happening, because it's even just the idea of like you said, like sort of plans falling apart when it's sort of contact with the enemy, but like that oftentimes I think it's like human nature to sort of like implement policies or procedures or something that address like the past crisis, like whatever just happened. You sort of are like, okay, well, we'll prevent that from happening again. But then it's like so that kind of adds credence to kind of that notion. And it's not to say as you did, like that you shouldn't have plans or shouldn't follow the plans or whatever, but it starts to like be another sort of impetus to kind of try to mitigate risk, where it's just like,
Right.
okay, if it is cloud-based, then there still are sort of variables that we have to account for and kind of make those kind of plans, but it would be different and probably fewer. But I guess if you want to kind of speak to that, of just maybe like, obviously that was like a very visceral sort of the hardware, that mainframe, and why that was sort of, reaching the end of its sort of life cycle, but then sort of like, okay, like you're working through the transition and everything, maybe like anecdotes around that of sort of like that change management, or just like managing a transition where you kind of have to maybe like balance both for some period of time.
That, if you're doing through a project like this, I think one of the things that you've got to do is identify, there's one or two people in your organization, on your team, that are absolutely critical to the success, from their technical, or even more so their institutional knowledge of how things work, and how things happen, how to make things happen for our campus. You've got to identify those people, I guess, at the start of any project of this magnitude, and make sure you keep them on the team throughout the process. We've got 2 people on our team that, if they had left, or because of the storm, or for whatever reason, had they left halfway, or during the project, the whole project would have come to a grinding halt, because they're such critical pieces of the process. The other thing I think, anything like this, and we'll probably talk to this later on, but it's not just the digital transformation from the technology standpoint, it's the cultural change that goes along with that. And in some way, in a lot of ways, that's even more of a process for the people involved to understand and learn how to do from the cultural side of this. Because in our old system, had been on this campus for 40 plus years, and everybody was just used to doing things a certain way because that's how it's always been done that way. When you introduce any kind of radical change or paradigm shift to this magnitude, things are going to change. Things are going to be different. In the old system, the student system and the finance and the HR were all separate applications. So those departments can kind of work independently and on their own and did things their own way. With the new system, everything's integrated. All the data is integrated to the point where if there's a change made on the HR side, well, that affects the finance side because it's feeding directly into our general ledger. And just because you make a change there, you have to be conscious of the fact of what's happening, from the accountant side, so that they're like, all of a sudden, money's getting put into a different account now. Like, wait, what happened? What did y'all do? What happened? So it's a big technical change or cultural change for the users on campus. Also, in years past, anytime there was a new feature rolled out, well, that was IT's job to test it, and they were responsible for all the testing. Well, now it's kind of being shifted, and the focus we're becoming more decentralized, and so now the users have to test their own system, and they're kind of at a loss of like, well, we don't know what to do or what to look for or how to act or anything to do with that. So it's we were able to do, and had an extremely aggressive timeline for our implementation for this project of 15 months. But I think the cultural change is going to go on for several more years now, of getting people to learn how to do things that they never had to do before.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think that kind of adds credence to, I think, the notion that's coming up a lot of these conversations of, talking with higher ed IT leaders for this is like the idea of kind of reinvigorating like you and your team as partners to your colleagues, of kind of helping to kind of guide that change management where like things may have prior be happening sort of in this like black box or something, and it's just like not maybe as transparent to people on the outside, or sort of very insular and just sort of like, coming out from your team. But if it's sort of happening in a collaborative sense, where it's like you can even just maybe do one-off trainings or different things, like just to help to get them on their feet to where they can be more self-sufficient. And it's like sort of better for everybody if your team can sort of focus more on strategy or higher level things and troubleshoot where necessary, but like that you would hopefully be empowering each kind of division and department to be able to kind of manage the day-to-day on their own, and then kind of check over their shoulder occasionally as they need to. Do you see that sort of playing out?
That's kind of the goal. We're still working on that, working toward that, getting them into that mindset. But yeah, that is eventually the goal, to take ownership and become, the lead, for those applications, and be, learn how to take control and ownership. I guess, that's the word, is take ownership of the process and become responsible. What we, what our job here is IT in this new in this new application setup that we have is, we think of as the users as the painter. We supply the canvas and the paint, but the users are the one to create the art. We're just here to provide the support.
Yeah, well, and I love a good metaphor. That's a good one. I like it. I mean, and I think I just remember an anecdote from years ago, like my first professional job. It was like, because I had the interest and sort of the basic know-how of like managing my own website, I got access for our residence life team to the content management system, and they gave sort of role-based access to just like sort of the pages that super relevant to us or sort of adjacent of like, like a student life homepage where the people usually like kind of get redirected. But it was just this like empowering, like, oh my God, yeah, we'd have to like get kind of bottlenecked and requesting just simple text changes to a website to like keep things up to date. And that I could be a member on our team that was able to more kind of nimbly make those changes and stuff. It's just something I think of in my head a lot, of just kind of examples like that of like, it matters what the tools are that people are using, how user friendly they are, and how much, folks like you and your team are able to partner with them and sort of, help kind of train and coach them through utilizing the platform. Because yeah, like, I mean, that creativity, sort of the art metaphor is so great, because like it's the idea of like you give them these tools and they can create such sort of unique use cases or something for a tool where it's like, yeah, I mean, like I would have never imagined that. Like it's not for me to think through like the design of a web page and all that. It's like, here is just all the building blocks that you can use, and you decided to make it this way, which is amazing, and then your colleague decided to do it a different way, and that just is what kind of works better for what they're looking for, something like that. So I think that, yeah, that's just a really apt metaphor. I like that one.
Thank you.
So I read this, and I'll be curious, I guess, to hear from you as we kind of wind down, that in another interview that you gave, you'd mentioned that you practiced Taekwondo and you took a lot of leadership lessons from that. So I'm curious, as sort of just a more kind of a unique wrinkle to your sort of, your background and sort of your professional perspective, like how do you see that kind of show up in sort of your day-to-day working in your role as a CIO?
Well, I got involved with it because my son had originally gotten into it, and then I got pulled into it, into that world. I started, really late in life in doing martial arts. I was in my 40s, and I actually, when I'm not working, that's kind of I teach classes now and continue training, but the things that I think are really pertinent between martial arts and leadership in any kind of organization. There's three things that I think parallel, especially in my style of leadership. One is, within martial arts, there's always this idea of ethics, and it's, respect, honor, integrity is, that's a core part of the whole martial arts philosophy. And I think, bringing that into any organization, when you're authentic and and people see that you're just being an authentic, that what you tell them is true, it's respected, and they, feel they can trust you. And I think that's how I help build my relationships amongst the stakeholders here or at past, other organizations that I've been with. The other thing is when I'm teaching a class, my goal is to try to help every student improve. That's just kind of, what we're trying to do is make everybody better. And one of the greatest things I see when I'm instructing a student or help them achieve something that they never thought they could do. So that's the other part that I try to bring into my leadership style, is a mentoring process, or getting the team or pushing the team to do things they maybe thought they couldn't able to do, or help them or give them the resources or tools to become better and succeed at a project. Now, it goes in different ways, but it's the strive to be. Sometimes you got to push people more than they think they can go, or in some cases it's even demonstrating them this is how I want it done, but in a mentoring way. The other piece that I think is crucial for anyone in a leadership organization is, one of the things we teach our students once they become a black belt, especially for the kids, and once they get that level, is like never stop learning, even if it's from somebody who is at a lower rank than you. And that's one of the things that I always try to remember. I can learn from anybody. And I understand that I am not always the smartest person in the room, and I don't have to have the answer to every problem. That's what I have a team for, and get them to. That's their job, and let people do their job. That is, and let them succeed. And when they do, acknowledge that and recognize that success.
Yeah, and that's really refreshing to hear, even in like what I imagine could be and maybe often is like a very sort of kind of hierarchical sort of like, I'm the teacher, you're the student, and this is sort of just like formally how it is. You need to just sort of, do what I say. Is that you can kind of break that down a little bit, because it, like, when I think of mentoring, I think it has sort of like aspects of coaching. Like you're kind of like there on the sidelines providing input and sort of giving sort of guidance and everything, versus it being more formal necessarily. But I think, yeah, I mean, it's really refreshing, just those sort of uh, lessons, because I think all of our sort of hobbies or different things we get involved with sort of like feed in and can kind of have sort of symbiotic relationships. Like we get stuff from our work lives that impact our personal lives and vice versa. And yeah, I think that's just a cool thing. I've not talked to anybody, I guess, that I'm aware of, maybe that practices and teaches martial arts and all that, and then I guess is very cognizant, self-aware of sort of what it gives them, professionally. But well, we'll bring this home with our final question that we ask everybody. So take this as you will. What does a connected campus look and or feel like to you?
So when I was thinking about this question, one of the things I did in the past is I taught classes for University of Phoenix for a few semesters, and the class I taught was called Healthcare in IT in Healthcare. One of my students on one of the assignments that would hand out was turn in an essay on some technology for the students to turn in, and there was a quote that I took from one of my students in one of their essays, and I have it on the wall behind me as a reminder. The quote was, "The problem with communication is communicating," and I thought that was a great insight because that was with the top of her paper. But I think that is where we run it. That is, and I keep it on my wall behind my desk as a constant reminder of me, constant reminder that communication is the key for everything, and you have to be clear, either whether you're giving, when you're the one communicating, or whether you're receiving the communication. As when we talked about our digital transformation, and I said culture is even a bigger challenge, or it's more encompassing than just the technology side. I think that's where we run. That's what we get with my idea of a connected campus, is getting the teams to communicate with each other and being clear on what they need and what they're experiencing. Um, and sometimes we got to get communication out of the way, because that's the problem. It's people are it's learning this new technology, this new language that they're learning to speak, and learning how to work together. So when you ask, what is my idea of a connected campus? It's the teams that are all, we're all here to support the students. One of the goal of Loyola is, our niche is to be a, kind of a hands-on experience for the student. And that's why we're here, to increase the student experience and make it better for them, to increase their learning and their whole university experience. And everything we do, has to align with that goal in mind. And I think that's what I see as a connected campus. It's when everybody has the one goal in mind and working toward that goal. A lot of times, what I'll see in other areas, where people kind of get in these, this is my area and I want to be in control, and I want to set the rules, and don't come into my area of expertise because this is what I control. And I think that's where we need to, get less. We need less of that and more unified in our approach.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of the right metaphor for like kind of sort of bolding and underlining what you're saying, because like, yeah, like it's the medium. It's kind of what I'm taking away, the idea of like communication, what gets in the way of is communicating is like, if it is this like signal trying to reach far and away, it's like, yeah, you might kind of lose some of it because it's sort of like getting garbled, or even just like if it's going through sort of like windy paths, or, if it's like a different language, the idea, because when you're saying like, oh, people are kind of carving out, their little fiefdoms and whatever, it's like, yeah, we're not like so sort of separated. We're talking like different languages. We've got different currencies or something. Like we're not sort of interconnected and sort of, establishing diplomatic relations or something, like so we like have a, understanding of each other. So like any of those sort of things that were sort of, going in my mind is like, how can you sort of like bring people closer together, have a very clear, smooth sort of like medium to communicate, and sort of everything's kind of translating, because like the idea is like what, one side is trying to tell the other, it's all about, the students, the student experience, what they're involved in, what they need, and, all of that. So I think there's everybody's sort of on the same team and working towards that same mission, but everything sort of gets like through this game of telephone, or any of these other sort of myriad of metaphors that I'm thinking of, but like it is that sort of medium, or sort of that those gaps and walls or different things that are sort of getting in the way, and trying to bring those down, get things connected, have people sharing information with each other, and all of that hopefully can empower every member of the team to give that best support to all their students and everything. So
Yeah, I think it's I think not just us, but I think a lot of organizations, we're still in this, again, because everybody wants this. I think we're going to move into an area where there's like before COVID and after COVID timeline, and we're still in the after COVID timeline, and we have people that are returning to campus, but you still have these people remote, or it used to be where you would have people all get together in a meeting room and to talk it out. And we're still in that phase of, well, let's I don't feel like walking across campus, let's just have a Zoom meeting. And you're kind of losing that personal touch. It's not just Loyola or any organization. I think it's kind of universal, where you're kind of having this disconnected, we can talk through Zoom, or like kind of like we're doing right now, but it's still not quite the same as being together. And I think eventually, I hope we kind of get back to the place where, and I'm one of the first people that say, I don't want to have a meeting that can be solved in an email, because you can always go overboard with too many meetings, and nothing gets done. But when you do have people together in a room talking to each other, and there's a much stronger communication than through text messaging or instant messenger or Slack or Microsoft Teams or Zoom, or we've created 1,000 applications now for communication, but it seems like we're getting less communicative, or the intention is getting lost through the technology.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, because and this sort of like the final word, it's like kind of that greater harmony of everything, where it's like, like they're sort of overloaded in all the digital tools and everything, but if it can kind of have these tools supplementing and kind of augmenting our efforts in person with one another, and sort of still valuing that, and finding the right use for sending that text message versus sending the email versus having a meeting, and all, like, and then how can all this sort of coexist together and kind of have all of it sort of amplify its potential and all that. That's sort of the strategy and things that folks have to think through, where like we're the idea of like a student could have started college in like 2020 or 2021 and just nearing graduation if they stayed right on track despite all these kind of challenges. So there's still like a lot of that residue, whether it's students or faculty or staff, or just generally in society, like we're kind of still washing away kind of the residue and different things of this very disruptive global event. So it'll be interesting to see how higher institutions, as much as anything else, are sort of grappling with these sort of choices of how to kind of combine technology with sort of in-person kind of human interactions and support and everything. And it's great to hear kind of the anecdotes and perspectives from your journey, embarking in your sort of own facet of digital transformation for Loyola there. And just really appreciate your time and your perspectives, and just great chatting with you.
All right, you too, Justin. I enjoyed it. hearing about some of the things that you've done.
Thanks for listening to the Connected Campus. Please leave a 5-star review for the show and share it so others can discover us. Make sure to also subscribe so you never miss an episode. Thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you in the next episode of the Connected Campus.